No clickbait here, right? I'm actually throwing my reserve. Ah, my wing's on fire! Oh hey, look at that. Freaking fancy lights. So I told you guys I'm working on like a video series thing in the background behind the scenes, and this is for that. Today, we are gonna talk about reserve parachutes. Personally, I am due for a repack on my reserve. It's generally like a yearly thing that you should do. The goal for this video is gonna be to go downstairs, hang my paramotor from the rafters, and pretend to throw my reserve chute to unpack it, and then repack it. But before we do that, I wanna talk a little bit about reserves. Basically, the reserve is normally a round parachute. Sometimes they're squares. And then there's another category that's kind of triangular, and those are semi-steerable. But the idea behind a reserve is if you're flying your paramotor and something catastrophic happens with your wing up above you, you throw that bad boy out into the wind, and hopefully it inflates and carries you down to safety. Now, opinions on reserves differ between who you ask. Personally, my theory on reserves is why wouldn't you have one? Some people kind of make excuses of like, well, I don't fly high enough to deploy one, or I don't fly in weather. Or they'll say that like they don't fly in weather that would cause them to have to throw the reserve. You know, it is a little bit of an investment to get one, but just get one and carry it all the time, because in reality, you never know. Reserves can be deployed from very low altitudes. Weather is extremely unpredictable, and if you fly enough, you might find yourself in a scenario where the weather turns and you have to throw your reserve. So with that, we're gonna head downstairs in a second and throw the reserve. Hopefully these things continue to hold my weight. Oh yeah, that is comfy. So I'm hanging from the rafters. If I'm gonna repack my reserve, I might as well practice throwing it. I personally have never thrown a reserve. So this is not obviously formal instruction. Don't count me as an instructor or a credible resource, but this is basically my description of how you would end up throwing a reserve. So the process would be something like reach down, grab the handle, yank the handle, which pulls the pins, but the job's not over yet. That's just step one. Now on my handle, I'll have a little lanyard about a foot long that'll have the actual reserve in a secondary bag ready to be thrown. Depending on what the wing's doing, I wanna basically try to throw it into clean air, and I wanna get a good swing and toss that handle along with the reserve out as far as possible, and hopefully it inflates and saves my day. Another important note, after you throw your reserve, you still have a glider. There's no way to detach. The motor stays on, the glider stays attached, but you do want to disable your glider. You could do this by like reeling in a brake line, doing a B-stall. The idea is to disable that main glider because now you have two parachutes out, and if they start pulling against each other, they work together to pull you down faster, and that's not good. You want one primary reserve to take you down like a paratrooper. So I guess this is it. That's enough explanation. No clickbait here, right? I'm actually throwing my reserve. All right, let's give her a try and hopefully it works smoothly. Ah, my wing's on fire. I hit the scout with my reserve. It's totally fine though. We good. Okay, paramotor's chilling. What we got left on my belly band is the outer container of the actual reserve. Now the bridle comes out here. This bridle routes back and into the harness like I mentioned. But right here, we got our link that comes down the lines. The lines went out, and this is how far the reserve got. That's as far as I threw it, which I think in reality would have worked if I was up in the air. Rubber bands stow your lines. They hold them all together. If we come up here, this is kind of called like a locking stow. This last stow is what holds this bag together. So after this locking stow is popped, this white fabric is the actual reserve, and that's what will deploy. This red bag, along with the handle, would more than likely just go out into clean air and float down by itself. So that worked pretty well. Notes that I would take is the initial yank to get that handle out took 2 tries. It was kind of hard to pull. In the heat of the moment, I'm sure you'd have plenty of adrenaline to help you rip that guy out. But in addition to that, I just took a moment to look around and swing and get a good toss, which in the heat of the moment, I feel like you might kind of panic and just drop it. But I think it's important to get a good swing and get her out there because your reserve can very easily tangle in your glider still. All right, so I'm gonna pull the rest of the stuff out and apart, and we'll take the reserve upstairs to repack. But first, the manual suggests that you hang it like from the ceiling and let it air out and kind of lose its shape for 6 to 24 hours. So we'll get that going on now. All right, so that seemed to work relatively well. Now, I want to give you guys my opinion on repacks. There's a lot of good places. Superfly is one of them, where you can send your reserve out and get it repacked. It's relatively cheap, and that's what I would recommend for most people. Personally, as you guys may know, I had a prior career in parachute packing, doing tandems, packing for myself a lot, and then base jumping. With my prior experience, I feel comfortable packing the reserve. All right, so this video by no means is supposed to act as a tutorial on how to pack a reserve, but I do want to show you guys sort of the process of how it's done. This is the setup I've got going on. Then at this end, I've got the bottom bit of lines attached, and then they go all the way across the entire garage over to here. Now at this point, I have a little clip holding all the lines together. Reserve is pulled out like that. Down here on this end, I have a packing tool through all of the shroud attachment points at the top, which is then pulled by a bungee cord. So essentially what will happen here is the reserve will stay in this sort of configuration, and you flip each panel basically like the page of a book, and you put equal amounts of panels to the left and right side of the lines, making sure they're nice and flat, no creases. And after that, everything is all symmetrical. You pretty much make reduction folds. So you fold towards the center, and then in half. And then it gets S-folded from top to bottom. That's what creates the kind of cubical shape of everything. And then the lines get stowed with rubber bands into the bag. All right, so we got her almost completed. She's in the first deployment bag thing. Now I have to get her in the container. A lot of points in time throughout this whole process, you kind of find yourself thinking, this is not gonna fit in the bag, but you just keep compacting it, keep tucking the corners in, and now that it's in the first deployment bag, getting it into the actual container will further compress it into like a really tight little ball. So I'm gonna squeeze her in there, and then she should be ready to mount back on the Scout. Shaboom! There we go. Got her in the package. My back hurts a little bit from leaning over for so long. 2 things I wanna talk about before we conclude this video. First, I did a podcast session with my buddy Anthony. He's doing a whole paramotor podcast thing. So I will link that down probably in the top comment or something. So check that out if you wanna listen to a little podcast action. Also, my friends at Resurgence PPG sent me some coffee to try. If you guys don't know what Resurgence PPG is, they help get veterans up in the air through paramotoring. They're actually helping out 2 guys right now that are single leg amputees down in Florida. But anyway, Resurgence started a new partnership with a coffee company, and I'm stoked about it because I like coffee and I can't be mad at that. And all the proceeds for the coffee sales are going directly to Resurgence. So I gotta try that coffee and give you guys my formal review of it. All right, so the coffee is fantastic. Like I said, I'll link it down below if you guys want to check it out. Super good cause, super good coffee. Aside from that, couple updates. First up, we just restocked the Risky Biscuits hoodies. These come in both this royal blue and like a dark heather gray. These are pretty much my favorite hoodies ever. Nice, high quality, they're medium weight, but those are back in stock on the web store. Link is in the description for that. The van mobile is actually in the shop right now. We had a hole in the muffler and I should be able to pick up the van today. And from there, we're hopefully gonna head to Florida tomorrow for the big Van Life Florida trip. With that is gonna come Aviator PPG as the first stop. And then we're probably gonna do some beach flying. And then hopefully I wanna do the Keys. If we can get good weather down there, I'd really like to fly that spot we missed out on last time. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video about reserves, chucking my reserve, and all that. Drop a like if you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Peace out.